Have you ever wondered what you'd risk if you had nothing left to lose? Would you trade a memory for a second chance? A loved one's face for one more week together? Welcome to the Holloway House, a place that exists outside time, outside logic, and far beyond luck. Here, the game doesn't play for money. It plays for you. In this story, a broken man finds himself at a mysterious table where every hand could cost him a piece of who he is, and winning might be worse than losing. Sit down. Pick up your cards. Because in the house that bets back, even folding has a price. I received the card on a damp December afternoon, while nursing a cheap whiskey at the same rusted bar I'd been haunting since everything fell apart. The man who gave it to me was Remy, a half-remembered face from college days, now older, gaunter, with the kind of eyes that had seen something no man should ever see. I didn't ask how he found me or why he chose that moment to reappear after nearly 2 decades of silence. He said nothing at first, just slid something across the table toward me. It was a playing card, jet black and matte, with no number, no suit. In its center was a single silver symbol, an eye, weeping blood. "You've got nothing left to lose, right, Evan?" Remy said, his voice as worn as his coat. "Only one thing left worth betting. Yourself." I chuckled bitterly. Thought it was some elaborate joke. But Remy didn't laugh. He pulled a small, torn piece of paper from his coat and placed it next to the card. "Number 19, Holloway Street. Midnight. Don't be late." And then he was gone, as silently and suddenly as he had come, leaving behind his warning, the black card, and a creeping sense of dread in my gut. I hadn't planned on going. Until the next morning, when a letter from the bank arrived. My apartment was being repossessed in 10 days. My accounts were empty. My phone service was shut off. The only thing I still had was a faded photo in my wallet. My ex-wife, smiling, frozen in a time that no longer belonged to me. I had nothing, except for the card. I arrived on Holloway Street at 11:57 p.m. GPS wouldn't recognize the address. Streetlights ended 2 blocks before it. The entire neighborhood was choked in fog, the kind that clings to your skin and whispers in your ears. House number 19 looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Rotting wooden panels, boarded-up windows, ivy strangling the brick. But a soft amber glow seeped through a crack in the slats. No doorbell, no sign, just a mail slot shaped like an eye. I turned to leave. I should have left. That's when a voice, low, intimate, and bodiless, whispered directly into my ear. "Step inside. The first hand begins when you cross the threshold." I spun around. Nothing. Just the darkness and the wind curling through the hollow street. I pushed the door open. Inside was a different world. A grand foyer lit by antique chandeliers. Crimson velvet chairs. Portraits of eyeless figures in mid-play, some holding cards, others clutching bones. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant click of shuffling cards behind a large set of double doors. A current of warm air nudged me forward, not wind, not forced. It was something more subtle, more insistent. Like the house itself wanted me to enter. The brass handle on the double doors was warm, unnervingly so. It felt less like opening a room, and more like being digested. Behind the doors sat a round poker table, for empty chairs, and one man already seated. He wore a porcelain mask, blank, pale, with a stitched black smile carved across where a mouth should be. He didn't look up when I entered. "Your name?" The voice didn't come from his mouth. It was in my mind, cold and dry like pages turning. "Evan. Evan Marlowe," I answered. I didn't mean to say it so quickly. It felt like I'd been rehearsing it. "Very well. The first game begins in 24 hours. Rest. Once the play starts, you may not leave." He placed a set of white poker chips in front of me. Each bore the same silver bleeding I etched into their surface. No value. No weight. Just the symbol. I should have left. I know I should have. But I stayed. Not because I wanted to, because the chair wouldn't let me go. Not with chains. Not with force. But with some silent agreement I couldn't recall ever making. The game hadn't begun yet. But the house had already made its move. And me? I had nothing left to wager. Except myself. I didn't sleep that night. The moment I left the poker room, the house seemed to rearrange itself behind me. The long hallway I had entered through had vanished, replaced by a narrow corridor lit by gas lamps that hissed with each flicker. I wandered until I found a room that seemed livable. A modest bedroom, faded wallpaper, a dusty 4-poster bed, and a mirror that didn't quite reflect what I expected. I looked into it and saw myself, mostly. But the eyes in the reflection stared back with a faint, unblinking glint, as if they belonged to someone else, someone who had already played this game. I slept with one eye open. I woke to a knock, not at the door, but inside my mind. A soundless pressure, like a thought imposed by something older than thought itself. It's time. I opened the bedroom door to find the corridor waiting for me, unchanged, too quiet. At the end stood the same double doors, slightly ajar, as if the house had been holding its breath, waiting. The poker table was ready. The masked dealer sat in the same position, hands folded, motionless. The three other seats were now occupied. To my left, a man in a pinstripe suit, pale as bone, with a cigar clamped between yellowed teeth. His eyes were shadowed by the brim of a gray fedora, and he smelled faintly of sulfur and dust. Across from me sat a woman with silver hair, skin like porcelain, and lips that never quite closed. She wore a veil over her eyes and gloved hands that trembled slightly as she toyed with her chips. To my right, a man with no face at all. I mean that literally. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth patch of skin where a face should have been. He moved mechanically, unnaturally, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. I sat without a word. The dealer's voice crawled into our minds again. The rules are simple. Each game consists of 5 hands. Wins grant reward. Losses exact cost. Chips may not be traded, returned, or destroyed. All games must be played. You may not leave until the table releases you. And above all, you may not ask what you're wagering. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask why not, but no sound came out. The dealer tilted his head ever so slightly, as if hearing my thought. You wouldn't want to know. He dealt the cards. The first game had begun. I drew a 7 and a 9 of clubs. Not bad. The kind of hand that could turn into something with the right flop. The man in the fedora called. The woman raised. The faceless man simply pushed a chip forward. I hesitated. The chip in front of me felt warm, almost alive. I pushed it in. The dealer burned a card, then laid down the flop. 8 of clubs, 10 of diamonds, 6 of hearts. A straight. Right there on the table. I suppressed a grin. The woman folded. The faceless man pushed another chip. The man with the fedora stared at me, then grinned, showing stained teeth, and folded. I called. The turn was a king of spades. The river, a 2 of clubs. Nothing changed. I still had the straight. The faceless man revealed ace and 5. Junk. I laid down my hand and watched as the dealer slid a chip across the table to me. The moment I touched it, everything changed. A flash, a vision, not a memory, but a presence that burst into my head. I saw a kitchen I didn't recognize. A woman laughing as she cracked eggs into a bowl. Children racing through the room. A dog barking in the background. I knew their names, their favorite cereals, the color of the sun through the windows. But none of it was mine. When I blinked, I was back at the table. My chip pile unchanged, except for the new one, warm under my fingertips. I didn't know whether I had gained something or lost something more. For hands followed. In 2, I folded early. In 1, I lost badly. The faceless man took the pot. When he slid my chip away, I felt a pull, like something had been scooped out of the back of my mind. A song I used to hum? A name I once loved? Gone. I didn't know what I had lost. That was the worst part. The 4th hand, I won again, barely. I touched the new chip with shaking fingers. This time, I was in a hospital room. I felt pain, deep, cracking pain in my chest. A hand held mine. A man with a kind smile whispered something. It's okay, Dad. You can rest. I didn't know who he was, but I missed him like I'd known him my whole life. When the 5th hand ended, the dealer stood. The first game is complete. You may rest. The house will prepare the next round. Take what you've earned. Remember what you've forgotten, if you still can. The others stood and vanished through doorways that hadn't existed moments before. I remained seated, trembling, eyes fixed on the chips before me. One was glowing faintly. The others seemed to whisper. I had won, and I had lost, and the house was far from done with me. I didn't return to the bedroom I'd been assigned. I wandered instead. The corridors in the Holloway house didn't obey logic. One hallway led into a stairwell that spiraled into a basement, but when I turned around, the staircase was gone. A mirror at the end of one corridor showed me a version of myself without eyes, calmly smiling. Another hallway was lined with portraits of players, Some I recognized from the table, others I didn't. All of them were painted with blank expressions, as though they'd forgotten what emotion even was. At some point, I stopped walking and found myself back in front of the fireplace room. Except now, the fire was lit. A roaring, unnatural flame crackled inside, but the warmth felt wrong, like heat without comfort. Above the mantel, a painting hung. It hadn't been there before. It showed a man sitting alone at the poker table, staring down at a pile of chips. His face was mine, but the eyes weren't. They looked hollow, like something inside had crawled behind them and shut the curtains forever. I turned away, stomach churning, and nearly collided with the masked dealer. He stood directly behind me, unmoving. "Curiosity is expected," he said, not with words, but inside my thoughts again. "But it must not interfere with your purpose. The house does not forget its debts, nor its wagers." "What am I wagering?" I asked him. He didn't respond. Instead, he lifted a pale, gloved hand and pointed toward a small door to the left of the hearth. "That door is only meant for those who've forgotten too much to leave." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. I spent the next few hours, or what passed for hours in this place, sitting alone in one of the lounge chairs, studying the chips in my pocket. Each one whispered differently. Some murmured names I didn't recognize, in voices that sounded familiar but distant, like memories that belonged to someone else. Others were silent but cold to the touch, and I couldn't bring myself to hold them for long. They were more than tokens. They were lives, experiences, souls. What scared me most was that I couldn't remember how many of my own were gone, and how many of these chips might already contain pieces of me. When the second game was announced, the house whispered it to me. A subtle change in the air. The candles dimmed slightly. The corridor ahead of me realigned itself. I walked into the room. This time, there were only two players besides myself. One was the faceless man from before, still moving like a puppet, utterly expressionless. The other was someone new. A young woman in a black dress, eyes ringed with sleep deprivation and madness. She looked at me, and I swear I saw something breaking inside her. "You should leave," she said. Her voice was dry, like paper burning. "The first game is the hook. The second, it takes something you'll never get back." "Why are you still here?" I asked. She gave a broken laugh. "Because I lost the part of me that wanted to leave." The dealer returned, faceless as ever. Second game. Wager begins. First hand. The cards were dealt. I didn't look at mine. My fingers trembled as I touched them, and I hesitated, terrified not of losing the hand, but of what would be carved out of me if I did. The first hand I folded. The second hand, I pushed in a chip. The woman stared at me, then called. The faceless man followed suit. We revealed. I lost. Not by much. Just barely. A single card off. But the moment the chip left my pile, the burn began. It wasn't physical. It was internal, like someone was peeling back a layer of my mind. And suddenly, I couldn't remember my father's face. I knew I had won. I knew his name. But the images, birthday mornings, his favorite songs, the way his voice cracked when he laughed, they were gone, like a burned photograph that left only the outline. I staggered back in my seat, gasping. The woman looked at me with pity. "Still want to keep playing?" The third hand, I won. The chip was slid to me. It felt heavier. When I touched it, I was sitting in a pew, listening to a choir. A little girl leaned against me, holding my hand tightly. She looked up and whispered, "Daddy, this is the song I told you about." I felt tears. I didn't know her. She wasn't mine. But she felt real. More real than anything I had left. Was I winning other people's memories? Or were these lives lost by players before me? By the end of the game, I had lost 2 more hands. My mind reeled. I couldn't remember the name of my high school, or the street I grew up on, or whether I'd ever been married. The woman stood up and walked to the door when it ended. "Soon," she whispered, "you'll forget why you're playing at all. And that's when the house wins." The faceless man remained seated, still, watching me. Or maybe something else behind him was watching me. I left the room and collapsed onto the floor outside. I wept dry, hollow sobs. And through the walls, I heard dozens of voices, speaking in languages that didn't belong to Earth. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking about me. Like the house was taking inventory. Like it was sorting through my soul. I don't know how long I laid on the floor. Time in the Holloway house didn't pass. It lingered, like fog clinging to dead grass. The air outside the poker room was colder than before, as though every memory I lost drained something from the temperature, from the house, from the world itself. Eventually, I stood. Or rather, I was drawn upright, pulled by an unseen compulsion. I wandered again, not to escape, but because the corridors offered no rest, no reprieve. You either moved, or you drowned in stillness. That was when I found the first door. It hadn't been there before. It was thin, built into the wall as if it were hiding, trying to go unnoticed. A wooden frame, scorched around the edges. And on its surface was carved a phrase, not in ink or paint, but scratched deeply into the wood. This room should not exist. I stood there for what felt like minutes, hand hovering just above the handle. Then the door opened by itself. The room was small, cramped. A single light bulb swung overhead on a frayed cord, casting long, crooked shadows. In the center sat a mirror, full length, covered in a lace veil. I should have turned away. Every part of me screamed that nothing inside this room could be good. But something stronger, a need, a pull, drew me forward. I lifted the veil. The mirror didn't show me. It showed a version of me, younger, smiling, in a room filled with light. I recognized the apartment. My old place. The one I'd lost after the layoff. I watched myself dancing with a woman. Her face was hidden by motion, blurred like a smeared painting, but I knew her, my fiancée. Lydia. I'd forgotten her name until now. The mirror brought it back. I reached out to touch the glass, and it shattered before my fingers could make contact. Suddenly, the air thickened. A smell filled the room, rotted paper and sour breath. The walls groaned. The shadows on the ceiling twisted into long fingers, reaching down toward me. I stumbled backward, falling out the door, back into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind me. When I turned around, it was gone. I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed to move. The halls blurred past in a haze of candlelight and decay. Floorboards whispered beneath my feet in languages that felt like wounds made audible. Eventually, I found a stairwell, one I didn't recognize. I descended, step after step, until I reached a door made entirely of bone. Carved above it was a symbol I'd come to fear. The bleeding eye. Inside was a gallery. Walls stretched upward into darkness, lined with glass cases. Each case held something different. A violin, snapped in half, its strings soaked in something black and viscous. A child's shoe still laced. A wedding ring floating in a jar of salt water. A heart, beating slowly, wired to a metronome ticking out a non-existent rhythm. But it wasn't the objects that disturbed me most. It was the labels beneath each one. Wagered by A. Wells. Lost, round 5. Forfeited by G. Renner. Claimed, round 3. Won by dealer. Asset unredeemed. One label simply read, Evan Marlowe. Pending. I staggered back from the case, while rising in my throat. I wasn't just gambling my memories. I was becoming part of the house. Piece by piece. Stored. Cataloged. Filed away for what? Display? A voice echoed through the chamber, hollow and wide, as if spoken directly into the stone. The house keeps everything, even those who think they've left. I turned and fled. Somehow, I found my way back to the poker room. The table was ready again. This time, it felt different. The lights were dimmer. The dealer didn't speak. The faceless man wasn't there. Instead, across from me sat a woman with my eyes. Not similar. Identical. She smiled as she shuffled her chips and said, I wondered when you'd catch up. Who are you? I whispered. The part of you that remembers why you came. And what you've already lost. She tapped her temple. They took it from you. But it's still in here. Somewhere. If you can win it back. I sat. The dealer raised one hand slowly, and the cards began to move without touch, dancing in the air before falling neatly into place. The woman across from me, myself, watched without blinking. This hand, she said softly, isn't for memory or money. It's for truth. The cards landed in front of me without a sound, weightless as ash. There was no crowd this time. No other players. Just me, the woman across from me, the one who wore my face, and the masked dealer, whose porcelain smile seemed wider than before. The air was electric with tension, but not the kind that precedes a wager. It was something older, more ritual than game. The woman tapped her stack of white chips gently. This is your hand, Evan. The one that matters. I've played for games already, I said. What makes this one different? She leaned forward. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Because this one is real. The dealer made no sound as he burned a card and laid the flop. Ace of hearts. 8 of spades. Queen of clubs. I glanced down at my cards. 10 and jack. Both of hearts. I was one card away from a straight, and possibly a straight flush. But I didn't feel excited. I felt hollow, like the hand in front of me wasn't a strategy, but a test. What's the truth I'm supposed to win? I asked. The woman across from me chuckled. It was like hearing myself laugh, but off-key. Like a record warped just slightly enough to be wrong. Do you really want to know? She flipped one of her cards without being prompted. King of hearts. If I get the 9, we split the straight. But if I get the king and the jack. She left the sentence unfinished. The dealer didn't intervene. He simply laid the turn card. 9 of hearts. A straight. But I was one card from a straight flush. This hand isn't about chips, she said, pushing one of hers forward anyway. It's about whether you deserve to remember. I stared at her, unsure what was happening anymore. Was she real? Was she me? Had I already lost more than I realized? What did I forget? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the dealer. The river card landed. King of clubs. No flush. Just a straight for both of us. A tie. But the woman frowned, as if this outcome disappointed her. Still not ready, she muttered. You're not even asking the right questions yet. She pushed a single chip across the table toward me. It was black, unlike the others, etched with red lines in a spiral. Take it. It's yours. What is it? She stood up. A reminder. I didn't want to touch it, but I had no choice. The moment my skin made contact, the world around me flared. Not in light, in sound. Screaming. My own voice, shouting a name over and over. Lydia. Lydia. Echoing through some collapsing, burning place. A hospital room? A stairwell? Then another voice, higher, feminine. You promised you wouldn't forget. Then silence. When I came to, I was outside the poker room. The black chip was gone, but something in my mind had shifted. I remembered a woman in a white hospital gown, pale as a ghost, clutching my hand, begging me not to play again. I had promised her I'd stop. I had lied. The hallway ahead twisted into something unfamiliar. Not carved wood or stone anymore, but soft, like tissue. The walls pulsed, and the door at the end looked alive. I didn't want to go in, but the house had dealt its hand, and I had no choice but to call. The door at the end of the pulsing corridor opened before I touched it. It breathed, inhaling deeply as if tasting me. Beyond it lay a staircase spiraling down into darkness. No torches, no lights, just the smell of copper, mildew, and something older, like damp soil freshly unearthed. I should have turned back, but I didn't, because a whisper followed me down the steps. You already broke the promise, Evan. Might as well finish the game. The steps narrowed as I descended. Each footfall echoed longer than the one before, like the stone beneath me stretched deeper with every step. Eventually, I reached a landing carved not from stone, but from bone, vertebrae woven together to form an uneven floor. In the center of the chamber was a circular table, not made of wood or felt, but flesh, veined and twitching beneath a thin membrane, as though something inside it were sleeping. At each seat sat a dealer, all identical, wearing white porcelain masks, their hands folded in perfect symmetry. There were no players, only empty chairs, but in each chair lay something. A pile of clothing, a set of teeth, a ring, a lock of hair, a cracked phone, remains, trophies. As I stepped forward, the table responded, rising slightly, as if adjusting itself to meet me. A seat pulled out on its own. I sat, and immediately I felt it, a weight pressing down on my mind, like cold fingers probing through memory drawers. The dealer in front of me didn't speak. None of them did. Instead, the table pulsed, and from the middle rose a single chip. It was not white, not black. It was transparent, flickering faintly with images. Lydia. The hospital. The moment she told me, don't do this again. The dealer pointed one pale finger toward it. That was the wager. The cards moved themselves. 2 drifted toward me. I caught them. King of hearts. King of spades. A strong hand. But in this place, I no longer knew what that meant. The flop spilled open. 7 of clubs. 9 of diamonds. King of diamonds. Trips. The table throbbed beneath my arms like a second heartbeat. I glanced at the chip again. Lydia's voice echoed faintly from it. You promised. You said you'd never come back. I pushed the chip forward. The other dealers, 3 of them, revealed their hands. One had a straight. One had nothing. One laid down 2 kings as well. My heart stopped. A tie. But then the 4th king revealed itself in the turn. 4 of a kind. I'd won. The chip returned to me, now pulsing faster, brighter. I reached for it, and the room vanished. I stood in a white corridor. A hospital. Lydia sat in a wheelchair, frail and shaking, with 4 lines like threads of glass. She smiled when she saw me, that familiar, tender smile I had forgotten. "You came back," she whispered. "I never should have left," I said. She reached out to me. I took her hand. But then, her smile vanished. "This isn't real, Evan. You're gambling memories you don't even know you're losing." The world began to peel away, like paper burning inward. I was back in the room of bone and breath. The chip sat in my palm. But something was gone. I didn't know what. I couldn't remember what I'd just won back. A sound echoed through the chamber. A slow clap. I turned. There he was. Dmitri, the man in the gray suit. The curled mustache. The waxed hair. He stood just beyond the table, clapping politely. "Now we're getting somewhere," he said. "You've earned a seat at the real table." A crack opened in the floor beneath the table. A set of spiraling stairs descended into pure blackness. "Down there," Dmitri said, "is where the final game begins. Not for memory. Not for truth. For ownership." "Of what?" I asked. He grinned. "What's left of your soul?" The staircase into darkness didn't wait for my decision. The ground beneath my feet tilted, subtly, as if the house itself were urging me forward, not with violence, but with inevitability. Dmitri remained at the edge of the spiraling descent, smiling like a man who knew the ending of a book he'd read many times. "Go on," he said, brushing invisible dust from his gray lapel. "The house doesn't like hesitation. It considers it cheating." I stared into the void beneath the stairs. No bottom, no end, just a blackness that breathed. I took a step down, then another, and then the stairs took me. I don't remember how long I descended. Time stretched strangely in that shaft, like rubber, like old skin. At some point, I stopped hearing my own footsteps. My breathing became detached, distant, like it belonged to someone else. And then the air changed. The scent was not rot, not mildew, but memory. That distinct, emotional tang you feel when standing inside a childhood bedroom or walking into the room where someone once died. It was familiarity, weaponized. At the bottom, I emerged into a vast, circular chamber with no ceiling, just a spinning black vortex far above, like an eye that never blinked. And there, at the center, was the final table. Only 2 seats. One was already occupied. Dmitri. He now wore a white shirt under his gray suit, cuffs perfectly ironed, a single red chip balanced on his right hand like it was weightless. The other seat awaited me. "We've reached the heart of it, Evan," he said softly. "You know what's at stake. You always did. Even when you first came here." "Remind me," I said. "I've lost a lot." He smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly. "You came here for Lydia. But before that, you came for you. Because even before she got sick, you were already hollow. You've been gambling with yourself for years. The house just made it official." I didn't argue. I sat. The cards moved like insects, twitching midair before settling into our hands. Mine, Queen of Hearts. Queen of Spades. Dmitri didn't look at his. He just stared at me. The table was quiet. No chips clinked. No shuffling. No dealer. Just us. "This is the final game," he said. "But not the final hand. You can walk away now, with what you've regained. Lydia's memory. A handful of truths. You'll be broken, but you'll be whole enough. And if I play, you're playing for everything. Soul, memory, self. And if you win, she lives. And if I lose..." Dmitri smiled wider. "You stay?" I looked at my queens. Solid. Strong. But I'd learned not to trust cards in this place. Not when they came from him. Still, I nodded. I pushed the transparent chip, the one from the table below, into the center. Dmitri raised his red chip. The table absorbed them both. No sound. Just consumption. The flop. Queen of Diamonds. 7 of Spades. 10 of Hearts. Trip Queens. My fingers twitched. The turn. 8 of Clubs. Dmitri looked down for the first time. He raised his eyes to me slowly. "One card," he said, "to decide whether you walk out of here or whether you become part of it." "You're bluffing." "No, Evan. I'm officiating." The final card hovered in the air, trembling. "The river," Jack of hearts. I had nothing but queens. I held my breath. Dmitri flipped his cards. 9 and Jack. A straight. I felt it immediately. The house moved. Not physically, spiritually, as if walls, rooms, and corridors were shifting to make space for me. For my absence. Dmitri sighed, almost regretfully. You played well, Evan. Truly. But the house always wins. That's not a metaphor. It's a law. So that's it. Not quite. He reached beneath the table and placed something in front of me. A mirror. Not large. Just enough to reflect my face. Only, it didn't. The reflection wasn't me. It was the faceless man, the one from the first game. The marionette. You've seen him before, Dmitri said. That was someone else. Once. Now it's your turn. I reached up, horrified, as the mirror rippled, and my face began to blur. I forgot how old I was. I forgot where I was born. I forgot what color Lydia's eyes were. But I remembered her voice. And I remembered the words she whispered the last time I saw her. If you love me, don't play again. But it was too late. The mirror went dark, and I felt myself slipping into the chair, becoming still, expressionless, just another mask for the house to wear. Far above, in a real hospital, Lydia woke up gasping, her pulse stabilizing for the first time in weeks. The doctors called it a miracle. They didn't see the chip tucked beneath her pillow. Somewhere far above, beyond the walls of the Holloway house, morning broke over a hospital window. Lydia sat up slowly in her bed, heart steady, breath soft. Nurses rushed in, doctors whispered. No one could explain it. But tucked beneath her pillow was a single poker chip, warm to the touch, etched with a bleeding eye. She didn't know how it got there. She didn't remember the man who had given it up. She didn't remember Evan Marlowe at all. Below, in the house that had no end, the dealers gathered. They moved through corridors like drifting smoke, identical in their porcelain faces and silence. One paused beside a new portrait, freshly painted, still glistening. The name beneath it read, E. Marlowe, permanent seat holder. Evan could feel the weight of it now, not on his shoulders, but in his absence. He was still in the house, but not in any room. He wasn't walking, breathing, playing. He was embedded, woven into the house like blood through veins, like dust in the walls. He had become something more than a player. He had become house edge. He didn't think in words anymore. Not fully, but fragments remained. He remembered faces, disconnected from names. Flashes of hospital beds. A ring, her hand on his. And that final thought, carved deeper than all the rest. I should have folded. Somewhere deeper, in a room that had never been entered and would never be exited, Dmitri stood at a curved table, reshuffling a deck that didn't exist in any known world. Behind him, portraits watched. Evan's among them. Lydia's, too. And others, hundreds, maybe thousands, suspended in the gilded amber of memory. We play not for money, Dmitri whispered, pressing a card to his lips. But for permanence. For proof we ever existed at all. He turned and placed a new chip on the table. It was white this time. Blank. Ready for the next player. Outside the house, back in the waking world, a man named Jordan Wells was handed a black card at a failing casino in Atlantic City. The dealer who gave it to him wore a pale gray suit. He didn't smile. He no longer slept. Not because he couldn't, but because the house no longer required it. Evan Marlowe sat at a table that had no dealer, no cards, no stakes. And yet, each moment that passed felt like a wager. A pull. A whittling down of what little remained of him. The Holloway house did not forget, nor did it forgive. It simply collected. In the hours, days, since Evan lost the final hand to Dmitri, the house had changed him. He no longer remembered the full weight of Lydia's name, only how it felt to say it. He no longer recalled what he looked like, only that he once had a face. And now, as he sat in the dimmest chamber of the house, a low-ceilinged vault where the walls pulsed like lungs, he realized something even more terrifying. He was no longer a player. He was becoming part of the game itself. A whisper slithered down the corridor. The house always collects. Evan stood, or something like standing, and followed the sound. The hallways reshaped with each step. Pictures hung themselves on the walls. His childhood home, a frozen frame of Lydia on a balcony, a bleeding ace pinned beneath a mirror. Each frame throbbed like it had a heartbeat. He tried not to look, but one made him stop. A photo of himself, sitting at a poker table. But not the real him. The version of him who never came to the house. Older. Wiser. a ring still on his finger, untouched by the wager. That could have been you, a voice said from behind. Evan turned. Dmitri stood in the shadows, lit only by the flame of a single floating card. Why show me this? Evan asked. Because even House Edge has to remember what it once was. Every permanent piece of this place was once like you, a player, a gambler, a soul with something to lose. What happens now? Dmitri smiled gently. Now you deal. Evan was led down a hallway he didn't recognize, though he'd walked it before. The walls were smooth now, as though the house had digested all its edges. They arrived at a new poker room. Familiar shape, familiar chairs, but everything was darker, wetter. A table stood at the center, for empty seats, and at the dealer's position, a man. Pale, still. Evan walked toward it, and saw the porcelain mask. Blank, smiling, waiting. Dmitri placed a hand on his shoulder. Every dealer has to start with one memory, something to hold them together, something to remind them who they were, so they can appreciate who they've become. He held out a single chip, white, faintly glowing. Lydia. Evan took it without hesitation, and sat. The door opened. A man stepped in, nervous and unsure. A newcomer. He held a card in one hand. Black, with a bleeding eye. Evan tilted his head forward. Name? He asked, voice dry as cinders. The man swallowed hard. Jordan. Jordan Wells. Evan nodded. Welcome to the Holloway House. Your first hand begins now. Jordan Wells didn't belong here. You could see it in his eyes. The desperation was still fresh, not yet fermented into despair. He wore a cheap suit, one sleeve fraying, and clutched the black card like it was both a curse and a lifeline. Evan watched from behind the porcelain mask. He did not blink. He did not breathe. But somewhere beneath the stillness, he remembered. Not Lydia. Not fully. Just the way her voice used to tremble when she said his name. The warmth of her hand before the hospital cold took it away. That was enough. The poker room had changed again. The chandelier now resembled a cluster of vertebrae, dripping with a light too red to be called candlelight. The table's surface was no longer felt, but something leathery and faintly veined. It pulsed every time a card was dealt. 3 others joined the table with Jordan. An old man with skin like parchment, fingers stained yellow from cigar smoke. A woman in a funeral dress, her eyes sewn shut with fine black thread. And someone unplaceable, blurred, flickering. Wrong. Each time Jordan looked directly at him, his face changed. Father, boss, ex-lover, stranger. Jordan sat last, directly across from the dealer. Across from Evan. Evan lifted the deck. It wasn't the deck from before. This one murmured. Each card had weight, like glass soaked in memory. As he began to deal, he noticed the deck bled slightly at the edges. Just enough to stain fingertips. 5 hands, Evan said flatly. First wager is automatic. The players nodded, though Jordan looked confused. He hadn't pushed in a chip, but one had vanished from his stack anyway. The house was hungry. First hand. Jordan folded. The old man won. Nothing unusual, except the sound Jordan made as the chip disappeared. A whimper, followed by a blink of confusion. What was I just thinking, he muttered. Did I have a dog? No one answered. Second hand. Jordan stayed in. He had a pair of 8s. Solid. The woman with the sewn eyes raised. The flickering man re-raised. Jordan hesitated, then shoved in a chip. The flop. 8 of diamonds. Ace of spades. 8 of hearts. 3 of a kind. He played hard. The others folded. Jordan won. When Evan slid the chip toward him, Jordan grabbed it greedily. The moment his skin touched it, his pupils dilated. He inhaled sharply. Mom, he whispered. I heard her singing. I was 5. Blue curtains. Peanut butter on my face. He trailed off, trembling. Evan stared silently. He knew that feeling too well. Third hand. The house was no longer hiding its teeth. The room grew colder. The shadows from the chandelier twisted down like reaching fingers. The other players began to stiffen, like their joints were rusting. Jordan lost. Again. A chip vanished. He sat in silence for a long moment, then looked up and said, voice trembling, I had a sister, right? Or no. Wait. Was it a cat? No one answered. Not even Evan. Fourth hand. The cards moved slower now. The table had begun to hum, resonating with some frequency that Jordan could feel in his teeth. This time he won. But the chip he received, black, oily, pulsing, burned his skin. He recoiled. Why does it feel like that? The woman with the sewn eyes spoke, her lips unmoving. Because it belongs to someone else. And now so do you. Jordan stared at the chip, took it, and remembered someone else's wedding. A daughter he never had. A night in Paris. None of it his. All of it true, in here. Fifth hand. Evan dealt the final round. He did it by memory now. Not of the rules, but of the rhythm. The house had a heartbeat, and the cards knew it. Jordan had a good hand. He knew it. A flush, maybe even a straight flush. He bet everything, his whole stack. The others folded. Evan revealed the flop. Turn, river. Jordan stood. I won, he whispered. He flipped his cards. The table did not respond. The chips vanished. The cards dissolved into smoke. The chandelier dimmed. Evan stood, mask tilting slightly. The house does not care if you win. Jordan stepped back. What? What are you talking about? That was a perfect hand. Evan nodded. The house only cares what you risked, and whether it still wants you to leave. The door behind Jordan creaked open. A hallway waited. One he hadn't walked yet. Evan looked at the stack of chips before him. Jordan's memories, his mistakes, his false wins. You may go, Evan said. Jordan turned. Took a step. Stopped. What about you, he asked. Evan didn't answer. He was already gone. Not from the room, but from the inside of himself. Jordan Wells didn't look back. The hallway beyond the poker room stretched on forever, but he walked anyway. Not because he knew where it led, but because he was afraid of what might happen if he stopped. Behind him, the door closed. No click. No creak. Just silence. In the chamber he left behind, Evan sat still. The porcelain mask fused to his face had begun to crack, thin fractures spreading like spider webs. Beneath it, something stared back. Not quite human. Not quite house. Something in between. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. As the room dimmed, 3 others stepped from the walls, shapes that had no entrance, figures preserved in the silence between hands. The woman with the sewn eyes. The flickering man. The old smoker with yellow fingertips. They did not speak. But Evan remembered them now, not as opponents, but as predecessors. They were the ones who stayed. Long ago, before the house had grown fat with memory, each of them had walked in just like he had. Desperate. Broken. Bargaining for love, survival, a second chance. They had all played the game. Lost. And stayed. Not because they were forced to, but because eventually they forgot what outside even meant. The woman moved first. She sat across from Evan, motionless. The man with the cigar took his seat next. He exhaled a puff of ash that hung in the air, unmoving, like the smoke itself didn't dare stir. The flickering man never fully sat. He hovered just above the chair, phasing in and out of reality like a scratched reel of film. The table recognized them. A deck appeared, not from hands, from within the table, rising from beneath the surface like teeth emerging from gum. Evan reached for it, and the game began again. But this time, no chips were exchanged. No bets made. Only repetitions. Motions performed for no reason other than ritual. The game no longer had purpose. It was survival through rhythm, sanity maintained through imitation. He understood now. They weren't playing to win. They were practicing, waiting for new arrivals. Because the Holloway House needed hosts. Needed people who could shuffle souls and deal away names. Needed gatekeepers to guide the next desperate soul to their seat. That's what Evan had become. A fixture. A custodian. A shadow who used to have a name. Sometimes, between hands, he would feel it. The faint echo of her name. Lydia. A laugh through static. A memory that hadn't quite bled dry. It always faded before he could chase it. One night, though there were no nights here, Evan felt a pull. Something outside the room. A presence. The door opened. And there she was. Not Lydia. Someone new. A young woman. 20 maybe. Hands shaking. Face pale. Clutching a black card. She stepped inside. Sat down. Evan looked at her. And for the briefest moment, he remembered who he was. She looked like someone Evan had once known. Not Lydia, not really. But the shape of her nose, the uncertainty in her eyes, the way her hands hovered above the chips like they didn't trust their own intent, it all felt familiar. She said her name was Marin. She didn't say why she was here. She didn't have to. The house knew, and it had brought her in. Evan dealt the first hand without thinking. The cards moved like they always did, on instinct, with the gravity of sorrow. The old smoker sat across from Marin, his cigar now a glowing ember of memory. The woman with the sewn eyes remained still, her blind face tilted toward the ceiling. The flickering man twitched in and out of focus, less real now than ever. But Marin, she was alive in a way none of them were. She still had hope, and the house hated that. The first hand, Marin folded. The second, she lost a chip and winced. I forgot something, she whispered. A song. My mom used to. Her voice broke. Evan felt a flicker in the dead place behind his mask. He watched her carefully, not as a dealer, but as someone who still, somehow, remembered pain. By the third hand, Marin began to cry. Not out of fear, but because the other players were too silent. Too inhuman. What is this place? She asked. Why does everything feel backwards? Evan said nothing, but the mask on his face cracked a little more. Then something strange happened. Marin won the fourth hand. She touched the chip cautiously, and she didn't see a memory. She saw a door with light behind it. She gasped. I think I know the way out. The room pulsed. The chandelier flickered. The table groaned, deeply, like a beast in pain. The house didn't like that. Evan felt it before the others did. The wrath of the Holloway house. The air tightened. The walls twisted inward. Blood seeped from the cracks in the floor. The cards on the table began to dissolve, first into ash, then into bone dust. Marin backed away from the table, clutching the glowing chip like it was a talisman. I'm leaving, she whispered. I remember now. I wasn't supposed to come here. This place, it tricked me. Evan stood. The mask fell from his face. His skin beneath was gray, but his eyes, briefly, human. Then go, he said. What? Don't play another hand. That's the trick. The exit was never through winning. It's in refusing to play. The other figures rose from their chairs in unison, trembling, breaking apart. The flickering man screamed soundlessly. The woman with the sewn eyes ripped her stitches and wept blood. The old smoker's jaw unhinged into something inhuman. The house roared. Evan grabbed Marin's wrist and shoved her toward the hallway behind the dealer's chair. It hadn't been there before. Now it glowed. She ran. She didn't look back. Not even when the floor beneath Evan cracked open and dragged him down. Somewhere far away, Marin woke up in her own bed. Her room smelled like dust and lavender. Morning light poured through the window. She clutched her pillow, and under it, she found a mask, porcelain, cracked. The Holloway house stood silent again. A new dealer took his seat. He wore Evan's face, but his eyes were empty. The House That Bets Back. A story by SpookyShade.